Hi, I'm Walt Heyer. I wanted to do a video sort of to help people understand what happens later in life to people who undergo gender change surgery. One of the things that people probably are puzzled by is how much different is a transgender's childhood from someone who wasn't a transgender, or just someone who was raised without issues in their family causing them to struggle with gender issues. One of the things that I kind of put a title on this, I guess, is calling it, "Where Can You Go to Get a New Childhood?" The reason that I put that on there is I kind of wished that someone would have made a video like this that I could have seen when I was struggling as a young child. Because I think if I could have seen a video like this when I was struggling with gender issues at a young age, I probably never would have attempted to change genders, and I would have had a complete different understanding of what it's about, because now in retrospect, years later, I can see that changing genders, quite frankly, is just pure foolishness. But as a child growing up, my life was different. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I did not really know at the time that the issues that I had encountered as a child would forever change my life. And those issues really came about by the people who were assigned to protect and care for me. Like my father, who was a very strong and hard-working part-time policeman, but he was also a full-time industrial salesman. Mom was not even 20 years old when I was born, and not only that, my brother had been born 18 months earlier, so she was even younger yet when he was born. So he did have a head start on me, but the question that I ask now later in life, was my mother really prepared to be a mom at that young age during a time when it was in the early 40s and the country was at war, and it was just not an easy time financially or any other way. It was a very difficult time. I do believe that Mom and Dad loved each other, and I do think that my brother and I were so different. They were willing to take strong disciplinary action to keep me in line, because I was kind of a wild one, much wilder than my brother, who I would just kind of characterize as a brainiac guy. And so I drew most of the discipline. But I never did feel like my mother really loved me. She was always so critical. It just made me feel like she didn't like me. Dad was a strong guy, and I did feel that he loved me, at least at first. But yeah, childhood, where can you get a new one? All that kind of changed when I was about 5 years old. It was then my grandmother, when I was being babysat by her, she started dressing me in female clothing. She even made me a purple chiffon evening dress. And when Dad found out what Grandma had been doing in making me a dress and dressing me as a girl, it did change everything. I began to feel like my life was just kind of falling apart. Dad was not the same. His adopted brother, Uncle Fred, began to sexually molest me. Mom's discipline got even more severe. And I would learn much later in life that on one occasion, her discipline was so tough that she thought at least, that she had almost killed me. I started to feel at that young age that I was a girl trapped in a male body. I really did start thinking about becoming a girl every day of my life from that young age. As a child, I became a loner because of this. I always felt very different because I wanted to become a girl. I could not quiet the thoughts in my head or the feelings inside me about becoming a girl. Then I was probably 15 years old, and there was an article that was just everywhere in the news about someone who had changed genders. It was in Denmark at the time, and being 15 years old, I think it was a very powerful impression on me, because at that time, I knew it was actually possible to change genders, and that article probably did motivate me even more to want to change genders. Even though I was attempting to fight those feelings for many years after that article, even to the point where I got married to a gal from my high school, I started a wonderful career, I raised 2 great children, but nothing would stop the feelings or the thoughts I had in my head about wanting to change to become a female. I was not a homosexual, never had been, never really thought about it, except I wondered, but I'd never acted out as a homosexual. But it would be several homosexual activists who would set in motion the process that would approve me for the gender surgery that occurred when I was 42 years old. And the surgery was done when I was 42. In fact, at the age of 42, you could say everything was done. My marriage was done after 17 years, my career was done, and my relationship with my kids and my life, as I knew it, was certainly done. And I had no idea that that surgery would have such a tremendous destructive process on my life, even though I remained optimistic about the fact that this was something that I'd wanted all my life. I went ahead and had various procedures done to my body that allowed me to pass as a woman. And I had good jobs. I worked for the government. I worked for 8 years and lived as Laura Jensen. I came to realize, though, when I was studying psychology, it's actually totally impossible to change someone's gender. So I felt like I'd been lied to, that I'd been tricked almost. And realizing this, I really felt that the surgery was a complete fraud. And then later I come to understand that no one really needs the surgery. There's a lot of people that want the surgery, but no one really needs the surgery. You know, I began to realize that there's a lot of things that drive the desire to want to change genders, but most of them are psychological. And I knew that I needed to return to my birth gender, but getting back to my birth gender meant that I needed to confront and heal from all the underlying pain of my childhood as well as my adulthood. And so when I finally began to confront those issues, I realized that I'd been struggling from what's called the dissociative disorder, which is sort of the minor side of multiple personalities. It's not the same as multiple personalities, but I dissociated from my birth gender because of the abuse, because of the cross-dressing, because of the things that had happened with my uncle and my mom, my dad, and my grandmother. All those things came into play to cause me to want to dissociate from my birth gender. And today, what I realize is, after writing books and studying this issue, I've written 3 books on it, and I've been talking about it for several years now. And I just want to reach out and say, if you know anybody that's struggling with gender issues, my suggestion is that they seek out psychiatric assistance and begin to try to uncover and unwrap and discover the underlying causes for those gender issues, because no one is born a transgender. Something happened in their childhood, just like it did to me. And as a young child, I suppose I would have maybe been a candidate for hormone blockers in those days if they would have had them, and thank God they didn't. But the idea that some child can understand what the implications are of using hormone blockers at a young age is really scary to me, because so many people regret the surgery. And so I want to reach out and let people know the key issue is understanding that something psychological has happened, that you need psychological treatment, and that treatment does not include surgery. So reach out and ask questions, and even get my books and look at the research, and you'll discover too that these are psychological issues and they don't require surgery to fix. So thank you. I hope this helps.